An engine failure in a single engine aircraft is every pilot's worst nightmare. It's serious, but we do train for it and the response is usually clear. A partial failure is different. It leaves you in limbo and there's no clear rulebook to follow. That's exactly what faced a young instructor and his student in this fatal accident. Indecision and missed opportunities cost them both their lives, leaving nothing left but this smoking wreck. Welcome to Shortfield. Now, I don't usually cover accident reports on this channel, it's not really what I'm about. But when something happens in the same aircraft I fly, the SportCruiser, Piper Sport in this case, I feel there's often a lesson we can take away. The SportCruiser's a fantastic little aeroplane, easy to fly, low stall speed and very forgiving, and with generally benign handling. But don't be fooled. If you mishandle it or push the aerodynamics too far, it will bite, and if you take liberties with it, it will kill you. So in this video I want to talk through a tragic SportCruiser accident that happened in the US in 2023. We'll look at what happened, what the pilots did and what lessons we can take away to make sure we never fall into the same trap. It's August 2023 and we're at the famous Van Nuys Airfield in beautiful California, one of the busiest GA airfields in the world. It's a midweek morning and it's as busy as usual as a 28-year-old flight instructor with just over 500 hours total time and his 24-year-old 30-hour-in student depart runway 16 left, the 1200 metre or 4,000 foot long hard runway which runs parallel to the almost twice as long main runway 16 right 34 left in their flight school's SportCruiser for a session of circuit or pattern work. The aircraft, registration November 384 Sierra Charlie, is 8 years old, with about 1,000 hours on it since new. It had just come out of a scheduled 100-hour maintenance inspection a couple of days before. It's a lovely summer's day with not a cloud in the sky and a reported light 8-knot wind almost straight down the runway. Van Nuys Airport, or Kilo Victor November Yankee, sits at 800 feet above mean sea level and is surrounded by the heavily built up area of the San Fernando Valley. The published pattern for 16 left requires a left-hand turn after takeoff. However, due to the proximity of homes adjacent to the airfield, a no early turn procedure has been established that requires propeller aircraft to maintain runway heading until reaching the flood basin, which is an area of open land about 1.5 miles beyond the end of runway 16 left, before turning onto crosswind. November 384 Sierra Charlie obeys the noise abatement procedure and climbs to the circuit height of 1,000 feet above ground level before completing a left turn onto downwind where they follow the San Diego freeway before turning left again onto base and then final for a touch and go. The little SportCruiser completes 2 perfect circuits. As the aircraft touches down on the second circuit, then powers up and starts to climb away to commence their third circuit, there's an issue. The aircraft climbs away as usual, except while still over the runway, the speed starts to decrease and they level off. The aircraft continues at a low height before starting to slowly climb again. They were in contact with the Van Nuys Airport traffic controller and the student had been doing all the radio calls during the previous circuits, but now the flight instructor took over and said to the controller, "We are having some power loss." The controller asked if they required assistance and the instructor stated priority landing, which he repeated several times.
Priority landing, clear for Sierra Charlie. Say again. Priority landing, clear for Sierra Charlie.
As they pass the end of the longer runway 16 right, they commence a left turn onto a very close-in downwind leg at a low altitude of just 315 feet above ground level. They continue on the close-in downwind leg around 750 metres or 2,500 feet from the airfield where they climb to 430 feet above ground level before completing a 360-degree turn to the right and then continuing and turning towards the airport.
Number 4 Sierra Charlie, clear to land any runway.
The controller asked again if the pilot required assistance and the instructor replied, "Negative, we're landing right now." About 10 seconds later, the controller asked what the nature of the emergency was, to which the instructor responded, "We are having exhaust gas temperature issues."
Number 4 Sierra Charlie, say nature of emergency.
I'm having exhaust gas temperature issues, 384 Sierra Charlie.
The aircraft had now descended to less than 200 feet above ground level and at a ground speed of just 55 knots. At less than 1,000 feet or 300 metres had been the 16 left threshold and pointing in the wrong direction. November 384 Sierra Charlie commences a tight left turn, which steepens aggressively, entering an unrecoverable spin. The aircraft impacts the ground in a near vertical attitude just 500 feet from the runway and is consumed by fire. Tragically, both occupants are killed.
Golf Charlie Zulu lining up behind 7 left. Okay, on that morning when they lined it for takeoff, little would they know that by less than an hour they'd both be dead. Sobering thought. Okay, everything in the green, 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 green. Hatched, harnessed.
As I open the throttle and the SportCruiser begins its takeoff roll, I'm scanning the instruments and watching the SB build. But after hundreds of departures in this aircraft, it's really my ears and my seat of the pants feel that tell me if the takeoff is normal. I always know where I put the aircraft if the engine quit completely, but with a partial failure, that certainty disappears.
That is the thing with partial engine failure. It's really hard to know what to do. You've got to assume that the engine is going to quit at any time, but then it might just clear itself. It is one of the killers in aviation.
And I've been in that situation. Just a couple of years ago, Jared and I had a partial engine failure at less than 200 feet after takeoff. And a combination of surprise and a lack of immediate actions meant that we took the issue into the air instead of putting the aircraft back down again.
Whoa, whoa. Okay, bring it down. No, we ain't got time.
Gonna keep the pressure up.
Okay.
Golf Charlie Zulu, gonna turn around and land again.
It was remarkably similar to the situation November 384 Sierra Charlie found itself in, and if you want to see how that situation played out, I'll link to the video at the end.
So let's look at their options after takeoff. So they get airborne, and they're only just airborne, and obviously there was an issue straight away because they didn't climb out as normal. So they've climbed up and to a couple of hundred feet, maybe 100 feet, and they've continued level and slowing down according to the tower and the ADS-B. They could have at that point gone, right, let's put it down straight on the runway. Immediately they had an issue, they should have just stuck it straight down on the runway. But they didn't. Now even after that they had options. They could have stuck it down beyond the runway. There was a clear-ish area, alright, but it wasn't unbuilt, it was not built up, it was next to runway 16 right. Where they could have put the aircraft. In fact, I think there was a taxiway there as well. But either way, they could have put it there or between the two runways. There was a grass area. Or, I mean, obviously, not sure what the traffic status was, but I'm sure that if worse come to the worst, they could have probably put it down on 16, just scoot across and put it down on 16 right. They didn't do any of that. They took it into the air, and maybe the engine picked up again. But it was enough to make it climb out and make them think that they could actually perhaps just get around the circuit and get back that way. So they take off and they fly almost to the end of runway 16 right before turning left. So they hadn't climbed up more than 200 or 300 feet and then they decided that they're going back. So they did probably the most dangerous turn in aviation. Next to the base to final turn is the impossible turn, which is the 180 turn straight back to the back to the runway. Now, they didn't turn 180 and go and land straight away. They did a 180 and ended up on a very tight-in downwind leg. Once they'd done that, they then do an absolutely unbelievable thing. And that is that they turn right and do an orbit. I have no idea why they did that. I can only assume that either the engine's picked up, they thought, oh, we can deal with the problem. Who knows? Who knows why they did that? perhaps they thought they were too close in, so they better just do an orbit there and then position themselves better. But obviously there's still an issue. They're still only at 400 feet. They're over built up area. You've got the runway right next to you. That must have been calling to them to just say, go and land on the runway now, even with a tailwind. SportCruiser will land easily with that 8-knot tailwind. No problem at all. They had a massive runway. They had 16 right, which they could, or 34 left that they could have landed on, or 34 right that they could have landed on. But they didn't. They did this orbit. Then they ended on carrying on down until they got to close into runway 16 left. Obviously they just thought, oh, we'll get back, it's not a problem. They limped the aircraft back, nursed it back, and they just ended up, but they ended up way too close to the runway. And I think in the instructor's head, he's thinking, I'm really tight close into the runway, into the landing runway. I need to do a 180 to get back round. Really tight, but I can't go over 16 right because of the parallel operations. Now, at that point, actually, the controller had cleared all the airspace for them, so they could have just landed on anywhere. But they didn't. They tried to get it back round again and land the way that they did. So, and it was that tight turn at low speed that killed them.
The NTSB later found that the carburettors on the Rotax 912 ULS engine installed had been incorrectly assembled during maintenance. The piston slides weren't indexed properly, and that a misalignment can cause vibration, poor performance and fluctuating EGT or exhaust gas temperatures. So there were several clear chances to get the aircraft back on the ground safely. Straight ahead, into the flood basin, or even a tailwind landing on the runway. All of those would almost certainly have been survivable, but instead a mix of familiarity with the aircraft, ingrained habit patterns, a reluctance to disrupt ATC and that very human urge to finish the job led them into a decision that turned fatal. The SportCruiser is a forgiving little aeroplane, but it isn't magic. The laws of aerodynamics don't bend. For me, the big lesson here is simple. If there's doubt, then there's no doubt. Get it on the ground as soon as possible. And I hope that's the lesson you'll take away too.
You'll see that they were way too close in to be able to get a good... I mean, this is about as far away as you can be. I don't know if you can see that. But that is about as close in as you can be. Just dragging your wing along the runway. We're a similar height to what they would have been. And this will show you. Can't do that. But we are really close in. But there's no loading of the nose is staying down. And that was from a similar height that they were at.
You can find a link to the final accident report in the description below, and if you want to see how similar our partial engine failure was to this accident, then you'll want to watch this video next. It is frightening. Thank you so much for watching. Fly safe and Shortfield out.